Well, first of all, yeah, and you asking you that question on our podcast would come back and bite me in the butt. So let me try and give it a go. And in some respects, I've maybe checked.
Hello and welcome to episode 281 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast, a proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network. Hope you're well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. I'm your host Ian Truscott, managing partner at B2B tech advisory Velocity B, and on this podcast I chat with a band of marketing chums who share their marketing street knowledge, which I hope will bring out the rockstar marketer in you. This week, Simon Daniels, former guest and Forrester analyst, now applying his considerable revenue and marketing ops expertise at Percasti Associates, steps into the Rockstar CMO studio as Jeff continues his vacation to share 5 things he learned over a beer, but I think he already knew. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back
After this word.
Are you tired of juggling multiple software tools to manage your agency? Say hello to Deltek Workbook, the ultimate solution for marketing and communication agencies. With Workbook, you can streamline your projects, resources, and finances all in one place. Imagine real-time dashboards and reports giving you full visibility into your projects, people, and financials. Plan your team's capacity weeks in advance to avoid bottlenecks while staying on budget to maximize project margins. Plus, Workbook works perfectly for both agencies and in-house marketing teams looking to boost efficiency and profitability. And here's the best part. At PCI, we're a certified Deltek partner and reseller offering expert implementation, integrations, and ongoing support to ensure your success. Want to see how Deltek Workbook can transform your operations? For a free consultation, visit pci.us/podcast today. That's pci.us/podcast.
When it comes to relevant content, you may have heard Jeff and me talk about the multis on this show. Multi-channel, multi-device, multi-persona, and multi-language. On that last one, let me ask, how confident are you that your content actually connects in every market? You're not sure? Well, it might be time to check out Phrase. In our experience, this stuff used to be hard, but Phrase makes it simple with its industry-leading AI localization platform that helps you deliver content in multiple languages without losing your tone, your message, or your mind. It automates the manual work, slashes review time, and gives you real data on what's working and where. Brands like Uber and Zendesk trust Phrase to scale their content across the globe and get it right every time. If you're serious about reaching more people and driving better results internationally, head over to phrase.com/MPN and take a look. That's phrase.com/MPN. Welcome, Simon, back to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you, my friend?
Great to be back. Thanks very much for having me on. I'm very well.
Of course. And are you enjoying the British summer weather? Although we've had some rain recently, haven't we? Which was quite welcome.
Yeah, had some rain, although it's pretty nice again today, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty remarkable, isn't it? This run of heat waves that we've been having.
Yeah. I mean, I probably wrote the most. I'm not sure that I'm particularly proud of this one, but I was so enamored with the rain that I got inspired to make a B2B marketing rain analogy. I think maybe my writing has jumped the shark, or I've hit the bottom of the barrel or something like that. When the rain comes and then you get inspired to write, I think that was quite bad.
It's the dog days of summer.
It is indeed. Anyway, welcome back, mate. You've for listeners, some listeners will probably be familiar with you because you've been on the episode 277, 263, and 113. So this is your 4th appearance. So I don't know if you get a discount coupon to somewhere or if I need to give you a prize, but that's a fourth time of being on. So welcome back. And today, I mean, aside from Jeff being on his holidays, I wanted to get you back on because I saw that you posted on LinkedIn and you shared some useful links, some articles about campaign strategy, which is obviously a topic we cover a lot on the podcast. And the nice thing is, and I'll share a link to the LinkedIn post in the show notes. There's a picture of you having a beer in what seems to be a lovely beer garden, surmising what you've learned over a beer on a glorious summer afternoon. And I thought, that sounds like a good topic for a podcast. 5 things that Simon learned over a beer. But of course, I'm not going to call it 5 things that Simon learned over beer because I suspect you already knew some of the things that we're going to discuss. So I'm going to call it the 5 things that Simon learned over beer, but I suspect you already knew because I suspect you already did. So Simon, why don't we start with the beer? How was the beer?
Well, the beer was fabulous, and indeed it was a beautiful summer's day. Another one in the, as we've said, the run of heat waves and so on that we've been having. And I was had the pleasure to be down in Dorset. So it was a pint of copper from the venerable brewing institution that is Palmer's of Bridport in West Dorset, and that is a Palmers themselves have been around for centuries, and it was what they call a session ale. It was only about 3.7%, so you could you get through a few of those on a summer's afternoon. They describe it as having citrus fruit and hoppy aroma, and I would concur with that. And it's named after the brewery copper that they make it in, and of course its colour. And it's a real ale or a cask conditioned ale, which means it has a secondary fermentation in the cask, and that means that it's live, and means you've got to drink it quickly before it goes off, like a pint of milk.
Nice.
And it's what we sometimes get made fun of for being warm beer, although of course it's meant to be served at cellar temperature if it's well kept, which is a term that the real ale aficionados like to use, and I would definitely say that it was well kept.
Not well kept until I put it in your glass, then it was well gone.
It didn't last long enough for that.
I know very little about real ale. I must admit, I kind of I vacillate between drinking Guinness or drinking just sort of regular cooking lager of any kind. So I need to discover that, and it makes a change from the fancy cocktails which Robert also introduces to. So that's our drink for today: a pint of Palmer's Copper. So. And it sounds like, from what you were saying there, it sounds like we have a potential sponsor there with Palmer's Beer. Should I approach him?
Well, I think you should, and especially since you have a category gap now that the Hendrix deal has expired.
Yes, we never quite got the Hendrix deal. Oh, nice memory. Thank you, Simon. Yeah, it used to be that I'd make a gin and tonic in every show. I retired that joke. It only took a couple of years, but I finally retired that joke. But thank you for reminding me, Simon.
Not at all.
All right, so we're going to do these 5 things that you already knew about campaigns, or whatever I just called it. And so let's start with the simple thing. And this is the thing that me and Jeff are often talking about, is that the term campaign gets bandied around quite a bit, doesn't it? And it's applied to all sorts of things, from email campaigns, social, and all that kind of stuff. So for the first thing that you already knew that you learned over a beer, what do you consider to be a campaign, mate?
Well, we're going to talk about the Forrester campaign framework in a moment, so let's start with their definition, or my take on it, which, as you say, you've discussed with Jeff in the past. A campaign should be an initiative that moves a specific audience with a particular need, a defined set of needs, through the buying and customer journey with an integrated set of programs and tactics that align marketing, sales, and product towards the common goal of the campaign. And the thing here is that there should only be a limited number of campaigns within the overall set of go-to-market activity, and those campaigns should have durability. So they're quite wide-ranging and have quite wide scope, if you like, and they're aimed towards a well-defined goal, if you like.
I like that, and the thing that, I mean, it's all fairly straightforward. And then you introduce product, which I think was interesting there as well, is that this terminology clearly influences the product as well. It's part of that campaign, right? Whereas quite often happens for us in marketing, isn't it, that somebody develops a product and says, here, go take this to market. and there's that disconnect, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting really as to whether product is part of go-to-market or not. Sometimes I was literally having a conversation with a product leader the other day who referred to go to market as if he wasn't part of it, and I thought, well, that doesn't seem quite right, to be honest. And at the end of the day, we're sort of talking about product market fit here, market product fit, and it's crucial that you understand what the product, what need, and what solution that the product is bringing, and how that fits with the audience. That's a key part of go to market, and it's the definition of a campaign, fundamentally.
Yeah, and I think that's and well, referring back to what you just said there, is that the alignment of marketing and sales seems to be our obsession at the moment, let alone get the product guys involved. So I think that's cool. And you alluded there to you mentioned the Forrester campaign model there. And that's what also caught my eye in the beer post. So for the second thing that Simon already knew that he learned over a beer point, is you're recently out of Forrester. So tell us about that model.
Well, that's right. So Forrester have what they call their campaign framework, and the emphasis of the framework based on that definition is that audience need fit, and that's expressed in a theme which is almost encapsulates the creative notion behind the campaign, the overarching idea of the campaign that resonates with the target market. And so within the campaign, it comprises a set of cross-functional programs, not disconnected, siloed activity across the different marketing functions and for that matter, the wider revenue ecosystem. And one of the things that Forrester like to say is that there's no such thing as a product launch campaign or even a product launch program.
Wow. Yeah.
You should always be thinking just in terms of what is the need of the audience, the need of the market, how are we addressing that? And it's a good point in the sense that really buyers don't care whether you've launched a new product or launched an update to the product. The question in their mind is, does it do something that I need it to do? The reality, as in much of Forrester's thinking, is harder to actually do in real life, and the itch to do a product launch is obviously impossible not to scratch. But that's kind of part of the idea. Then those programs, which are the kind of next level down from a campaign, should again be clearly distinguished between brand, demand generation, and customer marketing, so that again the outcome of those programs is clear. You know what it is you're trying to achieve. And I don't know about you, Ian, but frequently I've experienced particularly demand gen and customer engagement getting mixed up. So you execute a piece of activity that ostensibly is meant to be generating some kind of response, and you're getting response from new logo, new prospects and customers. And then you start thinking to yourself, wait, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to get new customers? Are we trying to grow customers? Are we trying to expand? And it makes it hard to know what it is you're trying to achieve. And that makes it hard to know what you're doing. And it also makes it difficult to measure, because are you measuring, growth and new logo, or are you measuring expansion? So by very clearly separating it out, and it's not to say that again within the auspices of the overall campaign, of course the idea is that the theme and the content and so on is similar, but you're executing it in a way that it makes it much easier to measure and understand what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, that goals thing is the thing, isn't it? It's setting the goals for each of these streams in the campaign, and then the problem is the business wants all of it, right? So what's this one for? All of it. I want all of it, right? And I want revenue in particular, right? Yeah. So that's the challenge, isn't it?
Exactly. So at least you can be clear about that, and of course, to the extent that leadership is saying we want everything, you're giving them everything. It's just that you're being clear about what is going to achieve each element of that kind of rolls up. Then the other thing is that the campaign spans the revenue ecosystem. So like I said, that certainly includes marketing. And again, one of the other things that you often see is that demand gen teams and event teams and social digital teams are off doing their own thing, and there may be some sort of loose connection between it, but it isn't part of a defined, coordinated, coherent campaign. Spread that out even wider across sales and BD and so on, and that starts getting diluted even further. So it's really important to keep that consistency.
And when you say the revenue ecosystem, I know that Forrester have also talked about this idea of frontline marketing team. So is it this is all the people that are touching the prospects and clients and audience, right? When you say revenue ecosystem,
I mean, I use the term revenue ecosystem to really mean the entire go-to-market operation, if you like. So I'm talking about sales and business development and product.
I like that.
And I mean, Forrester got themselves a bit tangled up, but I've kind of stuck with it because they. Obviously, we sometimes talk about the growth engine and things like that. And Forrester invented something that they called the customer obsessed growth engine. So then we weren't allowed to talk about the growth engine. So I started talking about the revenue ecosystem, which I kind of quite like as a way of describing the totality of the kind of go to market function, if you like.
No, I like that.
Yeah,
that's the trouble. That's the trouble with some of these inside baseball terms that we use, isn't it? Is that it's like frontline marketers. Like they need a little bit of a test sometimes, don't they? Right. It's like, and the other thing is we can all start talking about them, but if the people who are in the rest of the C-suite don't understand what we're talking about.
No, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm working on the basis if I repeat it often enough, it
I agree. Well, I know one word in revenue and ecosystem that they'd love, and that's revenue, right? So I think you're onto a winner.
Exactly. That's why I like revenue operations.
Absolutely.
It's got the right word right at the beginning.
Absolutely. Which is just on that revenue operations. That's something that you really focus on, don't you, in your writing and what you do? I mean, I know did we cover revenue operations when we chatted a couple of weeks ago? I refer back to some of your work on that.
Yeah, we kind of talked about that last time. That's right. Yeah, I mean, I became a revenue operations consultant or analyst rather at Forrester, and so again, I've kind of kept the label. And I use it as a very much an overarching term for orchestrating data technology process within the revenue ecosystem. And again, I might be blowing in the wind, as I probably said last time. And nonetheless, that's what I'm sticking to.
Cool.
And then just to finish off on the sort of framework, the other really key thing here is that even the largest businesses should really only have a fairly limited number of campaigns.
Agree.
Because it's they can be pretty wide ranging, accepting that audience need fit with lots of components underneath them, so lots of programs, lots of tactics and so on, which can be nested in a hierarchy. And the objective here is just to avoid overwhelming the audience with too many disparate messages, ensures consistency, and even helps address, I mean, you touched on alignment, it can help with that. And it can also help with things like, touch control or message fatigue and so on with the audience. If you're really thinking about, who your audience is, you can avoid that thing where everybody goes off and starts hitting the CIOs or if you're selling a tech solution and that the CIOs are just overwhelmed with messages from disparate bits of the same organization.
Yeah, but I actually think that there's some good evidence that we as a marketing team get bored with our messages faster than our audience do, right? So a lot of the time, because that's what I really like about this part of the model that you've described, is you have a limited number of campaigns and then you commit to them. Yeah. And because you need to repeat yourself a number of times for the audience to hear you, and you need to repeat yourself a number of times even for the audience to see you these days with the way that organic, social, and all that kind of stuff is working, right? They're just not going to glimpse you. And I think we're the worst. I don't think our audience is the problem. I think we as marketers are the problem, because we do something for a bit and we go, right, let's move on to the next one. And then, nothing particularly sticks and nothing really resonates. You don't build a reputation for the problem that you solve, do you? So,
that's right.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing there at the beginning, you were saying about how, these things are easier to implement and to talk easier to talk about as an analyst and map out and all that kind of good stuff. So while, we know that the work that Forrester does come from client experience, and pick any analyst firm, doesn't need to be just Forrester, it can seem a little academic. So I think the third thing I wanted to pull on of things that Simon already knew that you learned over a beer was you then linked to some practical guidance too.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I totally hear you on the big ideas versus practical guidance, and it used to kind of drive me a little bit crazy that we would have all these big frameworks and then be a little lighter on actually putting them into practice. So with the framework that we just talked about, the key thing here really is thinking about, well, how do we bring this to life, especially systematically? That's really the first question that people I used to work with would have, and wondering how to make that happen, because ultimately on the platforms is where that's going to happen. And here the tech doesn't exactly help itself in many regards, as is often the case, because the terminology starts getting mixed up. So Forrester defined this campaign framework, campaign program tactic framework, and you can switch those terms around. There were even people at Forrester who said, well, I think it should be program campaign. It's like, we've agreed it's campaign program. That's what we're doing. But if clients or marketers want to do it a different way around, that's absolutely fine. Within the platforms, Salesforce.com pretty much goes with campaigns and nested campaigns. The maps use programs very much. When Salesforce bought Pardot, they got themselves, initially it was a real tangle, because Pardot was talking about programs and Salesforce was talking about campaigns, and until they straightened it out, it was a bit of a nightmare. So the key thing here, though, is just to have a clear hierarchy of how everything's fitting together, because that's what allows you to coordinate and align, set those goals, understand what it is you're trying to achieve, and then map that into the system at the different levels. And crucially, think about what constitutes a program, because again, it's very easy to think tactically. So you might think, okay, we've got the webinar series, and it's like, well, that's a bunch of tactics. What are you trying to do with that? Oh, it's webinars aimed at CIOs. So okay, it's the CIO program, and we're doing some webinars, and we're going to do some content, and we're going to do some social media within the CIO program. And now we can say that's what we're trying to achieve, and that's the outcome we're shooting for.
That's I mean, because that's also the thing that we're always confronted with, certainly from my point of view in marketing and leading marketing teams, is people come to you, they tend to come to you with tactics. They don't come to you with goals and outcomes.
Right.
Why don't we do a webinar series? Well, and I think this, and me and Jeff also talk about this quite a lot, is that if you know your goals, and I think when I was on your podcast, I talked about awareness, revenue, and trust. If you've got those high-level goals sorted out, you've got something to validate a tactic against, right? So if you build this campaign model that you've described, you can say, well, where does this fit in with the goals and the outcomes and the programs we're doing? And so I think that's perfectly right. So anyway, carry on.
Well, no, I think that's exactly the point. And that measurement piece, again, is what's so important here, because once you've got a really distinct set of goals and objectives, you can then start measuring those. And the point about tactics is that no tactic, a webinar, an email, even an event, whatever it might be, is going to close a 6 or 7 figure high consideration B2B deal. We know that, yet we go around as if that's not true, as if a webinar is going to close a $1 million deal. So it's by combining them and rolling them up that we can understand the impact. Of course, you can measure, was that webinar successful? Did we get people turn up to it? Did they engage with it? Have we had some conversations off the back of it? That's a good webinar. If it was tumbleweed, then it's like, that's a bad webinar. But did the webinar close the deal? You can't say that. It's just nonsense. But by being distinct about it, you can understand the impact.
Yeah, and I think that the whole attribution conversation is one for. No, I don't think just one podcast episode between us. It would probably be a whole series of therapy sessions. But I think to sort of sum that up is. I've got an old boss called Grant Johnson, who I work with, and he was on the show quite a while ago, and he talked about revenue contribution rather than attribution. And I think if you start thinking about contribution, even within like what you're describing, this sort of a campaign structure, is this made a contribution to revenue. You can't attribute one particular item to it, can you?
No, that's right. And without going off into a complete rabbit hole, but with the way things are going with, kind of GEO, GPT, search, optimization, and the increasing difficulty of spotting buying signals and so on, we're almost going back to the future of measuring marketing in a much more brand type way, rather than trying to what we've been addicted to for 25 years or more is the kind of click-centric attribution, and that may be going, if not going away, then dissipating, or we need to think of other ways of doing it.
And that's a very uncomfortable conversation that we need to unpick, because not only have we as marketers been trained that way by our marketing automation products, and it then gets us focused much more on that bottom end of the funnel and not on the big, a big box that happens above, particularly as people are making their choices before they even meet us, is that the rest of the company has been trained. In fact, the rest of the world, it seems, has been trained on how you can measure demand gen, right? So everybody's expecting these metrics, and those metrics aren't relevant.
Exactly.
Okay. And so that actually brings us nicely to the fourth point. So we've done 3. So for the fourth,
well, just before we do move,
sorry,
that fourth one, I just wanted I do want to give a quick shout out to Sarah McNamara, who I linked to in my post, and she's written a great guide in talking about being practical and hands-on in terms of how to do some of this stuff systematically. So definitely.
Absolutely. I had a look at that. Well worth a read. Yeah, you're right. So Sarah, and again, I'll include a link to that in the show notes. And I think that, to the general point there, we have that problem almost on the show, is that it's so easy to build these models at the top level. Actually putting them into practice, and the practice and talking about the practice is very specific to a particular engagement or a particular company, and that's where you need to get in the weeds, don't you? So I think that Sarah McNamara's guide is pretty good. And okay, so let me get back to the track we were on. So we'll move on to your fourth, for things that Simon already knew when he drank a beer. This title is changing.
And then probably forgot.
And talking of articles you were recommending, you recommended an article on martech.org by Caroline Hodson, How Smarter Campaign Modeling and Automation Drive Real Marketing ROI, which kind of quickly opened up what we were just discussing, which was attribution, which we've decided is a rabbit hole we can go to in another day, and all the tech and the data and all that kind of stuff. But what were the key recommendations that you've picked out that make from good campaign metrics, if we're not going to go down this attribution route?
Well, indeed, as you say, it's a big topic, and I know Caroline would be delighted to get into it with you in terms of what she'd written. But in some respects, Caroline actually, I think, is pushing back a little bit on some of what we've been saying in terms of that hierarchy, because she's sort of saying that the reality on the ground is that, as we know, buyer journeys are not linear. They don't neatly go from one stage to the next. And I completely agree. What I would say is, again, as I think I touched on, there's a certain pragmatism to the campaign framework and the hierarchy and so on, just in terms of organizing your campaign planning and strategy and execution, organizing it systematically, how it fits in. So I think that's all entirely valid. And as I said, ultimately the idea is it all rolls up to the campaign, and that's where you're measuring it. So it's less important exactly how it's organized underneath that. What Caroline is saying, though, is that given the imperfections or simply the reality on the ground, it's important to maintain flexibility. And going back to what Sarah's put in her guide, one of the things she talks about is things like naming conventions, and that if you do that very rigorously with a good solid taxonomy, it means that you can track activity across the campaign, across the programs and tactics, and deal with the reality of a CFO turning up to what's meant to be a CIO webinar. Awkward so-and-sos that they may be. And nonetheless, you can still say, well, okay, we've got a subsegment of audience here or a particular persona. How is that working across the campaign? And as long as you've got good, like I say, tagging and so on, you can run that analysis across all of the response data and so on that you've got, regardless of how it's fitting within the hierarchy. So there's almost two ways of measuring it and thinking about it, I think.
And I think my thought on that piece was also that quite often, and when I do like personas and buyer's journeys and stuff like that, I think about needs, right? And I try and cluster my personas around needs rather than job title. And what you can have, and you talking there about the CFO and the CIO, you can have a need about mitigating risk, which they both will be attracted to, or is answering their need, right? And it's so it could be quite valid that both of those personas attend the same webinar or engage with it. So I really like this idea of this sort of taxonomy of understanding that the buyer group is engaging with all these different assets, right? It's like a buffet, isn't it? It's there for all of them to kind of come to. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted. So
No, absolutely. No, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's just a fairly trite example, but the messaging is the point. So risk could well be the same message, and clearly the CFO is going to be thinking about financial loss and so on. The CIO is going to be thinking about system
data breach,
data loss, these kinds of things. So the messaging might be slightly different.
True.
And so that's why you might have a different set of webinars for one than the other. But you might just easily say, we can cover all this in one place. We don't need to differentiate it. It's having the flexibility that is really crucial, and that's the point Caroline's making, I think. And then, of course, AI has its role to play here in terms of being able to do that analysis across all of the data that you've got. Never has some of the analysis techniques that exist, regression analysis and all these kinds of things, never has it been so accessible at the front line, because you can literally just with a suitably secure GPT instance or large language model instance, just say, okay, I've got some data here. I'd like to do some analysis on it, and it takes some not clever prompting, but just accurate prompting to tell it what to do. But in the background, it can be running our analysis or generating the code to do that, to do this kind of analysis. So it's amazing what you can do.
We're also seeing it more and more, aren't we, in the tooling as well. And I think that there are some specialist tools that are coming on the market, but I think we'll start just seeing all this stuff in HubSpot, Salesforce, or our campaign tools or whatever it is. The mainstream tools will very soon have this kind of thing, won't they?
Yeah. Well, HubSpot are definitely kind of pushing ahead on that very, very hard to incorporate those capabilities right in the platform and others as well. So it's all out there for sure. And then, going back to the original campaign definition, this is where ultimately ROI can be measured and demonstrated based on all of the activity across the programs and tactics to meet the goal that has been defined. And it's understanding the interactions of all the tactics across the campaign that is really the key to what we're trying to achieve here, and being able to link that all together.
And that overcomes that data overcomes some of the anecdotal data that you're going to pick up from your colleagues and stuff like that, whether one particular thing worked, or I never saw this ad on LinkedIn, or somebody really responded to it. You bring it all together, and then you can say, well, actually, as a whole, the campaign was successful, right? Because you can these days look at everything from soup to revenue, can't you? Or soup to revenue from the beginning.
Click to close.
Yeah, click to close. Oh, I like that. That's nice. Soup to revenue. What the fuck am I thinking? All right. So And that's perfect, because I don't think, there's two things that we can't miss talking about on this show, and that is the weather and probably metrics and goals. So we've covered that off, so that's cool.
Yeah.
So if we get onto the fifth and final thing that Simon learned over beer, but I suspect you already knew, can I turn the tables and ask, when you had me on your show recently, What's Broken in GTM, you asked me what role marketing plays within the go-to-market, in particular the CMO, as I was representing my craft on your show. How do campaigns fit into your go-to-market models that you discuss as part of your work?
Well, first of all, yeah, and you asking you that question on our podcast would come back and bite me in the butt. So let me try and give it a go. And in some respects, I've already touched on it, which is to say that campaigns span the revenue ecosystem and span go-to-market. So all of the marketing functions and all of the go-to-market functions should be represented within the campaign. And so that again is this idea of the overarching goal and theme and everything that fits within that, so that you have that audience need fit. And that's what makes a campaign distinct. Yeah. So really the idea here is the emphasis is on buyer centricity. So thinking about the buyer and putting them at the center, rather than thinking about it, as I mentioned, from the point of view of the different functions across the business. Because that's when you end up just looking like a bunch of kids playing football, soccer, running around the pitch, chasing the ball, rather than being, properly coordinated. And, that crucially means that BDRs and sellers are on the same page, especially if they're running their own outreach with management tools like SalesLoft and Outreach, so that again the messaging and the content and everything else is consistent, and that's really what makes that difference, if you like.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because I think you touched on there. I think that might be the modern challenge right now in the sales and marketing kind of, I don't know if the right word is relationship, but in that process, right, is because now tools are enabling the sort of savvy seller to actually start doing a lot of their own outreach, and that just the risk there in bumping up against the email marketing campaigns, social marketing campaigns that are happening is huge, isn't it? And that you can quickly overwhelm or piss off your audience, because you've now got at scale with all these AI tools, sellers doing what your marketing teams have traditionally done. So I think that's a bit of a challenge right now, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It has been really since the implementation or launch of those tools, when those tools first started becoming available. And I did a SalesLoft deployment a few years ago now, and almost the top two problems or considerations were, how do we coordinate this with marketing activity? And so again, that's in some respects what the campaign framework helps with, I think, just in the sense of understanding how this activity is fitting together, and who's
the
doing
problem
what,
is, I think,
so on.
I think the problem is sometimes that tooling problem exacerbates the ownership problem, right? Which is that these are sales tools, and therefore we're going to run our sales campaigns. These are marketing tools, and we're going to run marketing campaigns. The audience doesn't give a fuck, and they hate it, right? So the and the, like you say, the common messaging, the content, it's incredibly important that that's very consistent and
but it's not a marketing campaign or a sales campaign; it's a go-to-market.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a good point.
That's the crucial point. And so they may be specific to a particular motion, like you might have the enterprise campaign or the PLG campaign, and again, that's what's differentiating between the audience need fit, if you like.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And I think it's a good way to end on your 5. So aside from me learning a little bit about proper beer, the 5 things we covered there was that you learned over a beer, although I suspect you already knew, the definition of the campaign. We talked about the Forrester model, how to practically apply it. And I've got a couple of links to some other articles that I'll put into the show notes, the metrics that we should use and how it fits into an overall GTM plan. Thank you, Simon, for coming back on the podcast. And also, back to the podcast that we referred to there, your podcast. How's that going? I like what you described. You're so fancy. You described your current series as the Summer Cognoscenti series, of which I was a part. I've never been part of cognoscenti before. Tell us about that.
Well, I can't take credit for that. That was Louis Fernandez, my co-host.
He fancy.
And so he came up with that idea. Well, it's going very well, I think, although, we're not going to trouble Messrs. Campbell and Stewart for listenership in the podcast stakes, although we like to model ourselves after them a little bit. Mm-hmm. And what we're aiming to do is just to look at the go-to-market challenges, across the board. And Louis been publishing a newsletter on this for a few months now, so we're kind of bringing that to life. Mm-hmm. And then, while it's not an interview podcast per se, we've had some guests in the past. For the summer, we decided that we would just go all out on a series of interviews, which we've called Summer Cognoscenti, which you indeed were a contributor. And so, we're having some fun and getting some messages out there as best we can.
Cool. And that's on all of everybody's favorite podcast platforms. And it's called What's Broken in GTM and How to Fix It. Have I got that right?
That's right. Yeah. What it lacks in concision, it makes up for in we haven't quite worked out.
So look that up, folks. So, and aside from your podcast, when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you, mate?
Well, I'm all about LinkedIn, doubling down on LinkedIn these days. So always delighted to connect. And, what I'm trying to do there, obviously, is just share some thoughts, share what I'm seeing other people talking about, what I'm up to. And I will make sure to post some more about beer.
Excellent. And then that'll inspire me to definitely bring you back on. You talk about beer, mate, and that gets my attention. I
Fabulous.
Like it. All right, mate. Well, I look forward to speaking to you soon. And I think we're actually catching up together tomorrow in London. So I'm looking forward to seeing you, mate.
There will be a beer involved.
All right. Cheers, buddy. So that's a wrap on episode 281 of the Rockstar CMO effing Marketing Podcast. Thank you for putting a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track, and jiving along with us. Thanks to Simon for his great company. Always a pleasure to hang out with him. And if you have a revenue or marketing operations challenge, I would encourage you to get in touch. Definitely one of the really good guys. And as he mentioned, just search Simon Daniels on LinkedIn. And of course, you can find links to me, Simon, the LinkedIn post we discussed, and all the other articles we chatted about there in the show notes, along with our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes on rockstarcmo.com, or look us up on LinkedIn. Just search Rockstar CMO. Coming up next, I'll be chatting with Robert in our virtual bar on Friday, so that will drop on Saturday. And as Jeff continues his vacation, I have another special episode planned next Wednesday. And I hope you join us for both of those here on Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.